Hello, hello, hello. Good night, everyone. So I'm just stopping by to go through the statement submitted to the Commission of Inquiry by Catherine Balkissoon. Of course, I will allow many of you to join the live. I did start, must say, a minute early, but that's fine. Many of you have been asking, how do I get access to the documents? Which document do I download? So before I begin the commission of the Catherine Balkissoon statement, I'm going to show you exactly where you can go to get the documents. So first of all, I'm going to type it in to the chat, right? And I'm going to tell you to go to www.COE2022.com, right? So you go to COE2022.com. I'm going to put it up here. Right, when you go onto this website, I'm inviting you to then scroll down and press View All Documents. Let that load. Now, the bundle that we are looking for, this gives you all the media releases and whatnot, but the bundle that we are looking for, we have to scroll down to where it says correspondence, and we're looking for this bundle 221111, bundle of submissions received by the commission. Then we open this bundle, and then when we press this here, it will download a bundle. Now I must tell you that this is quite a big file, right? Because the page we will be reading today is page 5974 of 12,594, right? So I hope that is quite clear, and you can join me in downloading that document as we speak, or just follow and read it as I'm reading it. But for those of you who wanted to know where you can get the relevant bundles, just follow the process that I've just exemplified online. Go to COE2022.com and look for the bundle of submissions received by the Commission, and go to page 5974 out of 12,574. Okay, now let's get straight into reading the statement submitted to the Commission of Inquiry by Catherine Balkissoon. Right? So let's get started. Statement of Catherine Balkissoon, Acting Technical Lead, Paria. I am Acting Technical Lead at Paria Fuel Trading Company, Paria. I have been acting in the position from November 2012. I report to Michael Way, the Technical and Maintenance Manager. Role, duties, and functions. Role. My duties are to direct the provision of cost-efficient and timely laboratory engineering services to terminal operations. Develop and drive the automation strategy of terminal operations. Ensure provision of technical engineering input to projects as required. Oversee the timely, accurate, and reliable provision of product testing services to customers. Approve and monitor the implementation of improvements to laboratory facility, equipment, methods, and procedures. Manage support of product quality, asset integrity and reliability, and environmental monitoring. Ensure the governance of process safety management compliance, in particular management of change, process hazard analysis, process safety information. Enforce compliance with HSEC practices, rules, and standards through proactive HSEC performance review and intervention. I think I missed out number 8, which says ensure compliance with asset risk management policies, procedures, and PSM. Communicate information effectively upwards and downwards. Develop strategic goals, objectives, and key performance indicators for technical and utilize performance management system to measure, manage, and motivate performance. Develop and implement staffing strategy and people development plans in consultation with HR. Develop trusting relationships with workers and address grievances. Direct the development of departmental budgets and monitor and control utilization. Undertake any other assignments required from time to time to fulfill the job purpose. I possess a Bachelor of Science in Chemical and Process Engineering from the University of the West Indies and have about 24 years post-qualification experience. Post-incident involvement, Friday, February 25th, 2022. I first learned of the incident involving the 5 divers from Michael Way on Friday, 25th February at 3:55 p.m. I was at home when he called to inform me that they went missing at berth 6 during works that were being conducted on 36 Sea Line. He indicated that the on-site person saw a splash on the monitor connected to the hyperbaric chamber in which the divers were working at the time, and that Mr. Colin Piper, Paria's Terminal Operations Manager, may require assistance. I immediately called Mr. Piper, who then asked me to come on site. While en route, I called Mr. Rene Niblet, Paria's onshore lead, who informed me that he was unable to assist as he was in Tobago. Mr. Jane Jagannath, Paria's onshore operations team supervisor, who informed me that he had no further details other than 5 divers were missing, and Mr. Paul Yearwood, HSC coordinator, to inform him that I was on my way. Based on Paria's incident command system, the Incident Management Team, IMT, also called the Incident Command Team, ICT, had to be convened under Mr. Colin Piper as the designated incident commander in response to the incident, which could be classified as a major emergency. The IMT's designed incident command post is the shipping building at Paria's premises in Pointe-a-Pierre. I therefore headed to the shipping building, and upon my arrival at Paria at circa 5 p.m., I attended an IMT meeting downstairs in the conference room, where I was again informed that a splash was seen, 5 divers went missing, and that the water searches were being conducted. Mr. Terence Rampasad Singh, Paria's maintenance planner, and I left launch landing on the launch Gull vessel, but then were transferred on to the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard vessel, and the Gull was unable to be docked at berth number 6 due to space constraints. While on my way to berth 6, I observed a retrieved diver who I later learnt was Christopher Budram, being transported in a vessel heading towards shore. My role in the aftermath of the incident was to provide on-site logistical and technical assistance and support to the search and rescue efforts, to update the IMT on my observations and information from on-site, and to act as a liaison where necessary between the persons on-site and the IMT and vice versa. Upon my arrival on berth 6 at circa 6 p.m., I called Mr. Paul Yearwood, Paria's HSC coordinator, and requested lights. I then proceeded to make my way to a barge being utilized by LMCS, the company which employed the divers, where I introduced myself to Mr. Dexter Guerra, LMCS construction supervisor. When I arrived at berth 6, I saw Paria's and Kenson personnel on site, including HSC, operations and maintenance personnel. At that time, I observed persons who appeared to be LMCS divers in the water and going back and forth in and out of the water. I also observed that the air compressor was running and not switched off. The function of the air compressor was to displace the water level and therefore kept the hyperbaric chamber dry. Therefore, the fact that the compressor was running meant that at the time I made my observation, the condition in the chamber are unlikely to have been flooded. I saw a group who appeared to be LMCS persons huddled together looking at something small being held by one of them. I was informed by Paria HSE personnel, whose name I do not remember, that a GoPro camera was recovered. I requested the said HSE panel to secure same if possible. I was also informed that a scuba tank was recovered from within the chamber. Between 6 p.m. and 6:30 p.m., I met with Mr. Andrew Farah, LMCS dive supervisor, who indicated to me that LMCS was running out of scuba tank air and that LMCS divers and their diving equipment, scuba tanks, were trying to make their way from Carenage to come to Paria. I then called Mr. Sheldon Subero, Paria security lead, for assistance for an escort for the LMCS divers and diving equipment. I also called Mr. Paul Yearwood for assistance to source additional scuba tanks. I continued to observe what appeared to be LMCS divers in the water in the vicinity of the hyperbaric chamber, and that the visibility was decreasing due to the onset of night. I requested from offshore operations, Mr. Jason Beckles and Mr. Vishram Harichan, that lighting, in addition to the lighting at the booth and the crane barge, be installed. I called Mr. Way to request additional lighting, but was informed that while lighting towers were on the vessel, they could not be deployed to illuminate the berth 6 riser area. There was no way to lift them onto the barge. I observed that the lights from the Paria tugs and vessels were used to assist with visibility. At circa 7 p.m., Mr. Piper called to instruct me that further diving was unsafe and not allowed, or words to that effect. I received the call on my cell phone and I put it on speakerphone, which made Mr. Piper's voice and instructions audible to persons around me. I also relayed Mr. Piper's instruction to the group of LMCS personnel, who included Mr. Dexter Guerra. However, some of the said LMCS personnel reacted in a hostile manner, and I heard one of them shouting in response that "this is we family and all you can't stop we," or words to that effect. I therefore walked away. At this time, divers were still in the water, and no diver came out of the water or stopped diving after I delivered Mr. Piper's instructions to them. I informed Mr. Piper that, notwithstanding his instructions, persons continued to dive and that I was not in a position to stop them from continuing to do so. He asked me whether he should call security, and I responded that he shouldn't, and that calling security would only make things worse. No instruction was given by Mr. Piper or anyone else in authority to me, or in my presence, or to my knowledge, to the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard or any Paria security personnel to enforce Mr. Piper's instructions. Indeed, while I was at berth 6, no officer of the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard, no member of Paria security, or any other person did anything to enforce Mr. Piper's instructions or to restrict search and rescue efforts being made by LMCS divers then on the scene. I observed that LMCS divers continued to dive in the water unabated and without interference after I passed on to them Mr. Piper's instructions to me. I also observed additional LMCS personnel arriving on site around 7:30 p.m. and placing diving equipment on the barge utilized by LMCS. At circa 7:35 p.m., I received a call from the vessel Spearfish saying that they have a ROV, an unoccupied underwater robot connected to a ship by a series of cables. I went to the LMCS dive supervisor, Mr. Andrew Farah, and asked him to communicate directly with the vessel on this, as he was overseeing the diving operations. After he spoke with vessel Spearfish, He told me that the ROV was too big to fit into the pipe and will not work. At around the same time, representatives of Professional Inspection Services Limited (PISL) arrived on the LMCS barge with a borescope camera. However, their camera did not have a light and that the tether line was only 100 feet and was therefore not used. Circa 8 p.m., HSE personnel informed me that LMCS personnel said that they are hearing knocking sounds from the vicinity of berth number 5, but could not confirm if it was in a pattern or random, and that LMCS wanted to open the flange at berth number 5. I passed on this information to Mr. Colin Piper. I did not personally hear any such noises. The only sounds I heard were the sounds of the compressor running and of the crowd on site. Around 8:30 p.m. to 9 p.m., I spoke with the TTCG team and Lieutenant Hargreaves. I showed Lieutenant Hargreaves the cut riser that was located on the crane barge so that he could understand the size of the pipeline. The TTCG then evaluated the information amongst themselves. I discussed with the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard if diving into the pipe to rescue the missing divers was safe. The Coast Guard said that such a rescue dive was too risky to attempt. Lieutenant Hargreaves also informed me that they were not trained nor had the equipment to perform commercial diving. Circa 9:15 p.m., Mr. Kazim Ali Sr., LMCS owner, manager, told Mr. Piper and I via phone about knocking noises reportedly being heard at berth number 5. He also requested that LMCS be permitted to install the topside riser and to remove the flange at berth number 5. Around 10 p.m., I observed LMCS divers entering the water to install the topside riser to the lower piece of the riser. The compressor was shut down and the crane barge was used. During my call to relay this information to Mr. Piper, he informed me that Mr. Boodram stated that he came across 2 air pockets and 2 weld seams on his way out, and that a borescope with a camera and light will be on site soon. Circa 11 p.m., Mr. Piper instructed me not to remove the flange at berth number 5, and that the cover from the hyperbaric chamber needed to be removed. Between 10:30 p.m. and 11:30 p.m., I spoke several times to the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard Lieutenant Commander Mirage and Lieutenant Hargreaves, providing status updates. I was still on the LMCS crane barge about midnight when I saw the new borescope being utilized. I asked Mr. Visham Haricharan, Paria offshore lead, who was located on berth 6, for an update on the borescope. He indicated that the borescope camera did not show any air pockets or signs of the missing divers and that it could not proceed beyond a certain point inside the pipe. Saturday, 26th February 2022. Sometime between midnight Friday, 25th February and 1 a.m. on Saturday, 26th February, I asked the IMT whether the flange at berth 5 should be removed as requested by LMCS Kazim Ali. I was told by the IMT to stand down on that activity as they were waiting on camera assessments. Around 2:15 a.m. on Saturday, 26 February, Lieutenant Hargreaves asked to be stood down, given that no diving would be performed by them that night and they could be redeployed if needed later. I referred him to the IMT to make that decision. From the LMC's barge around 3 a.m., I observed that a pipeline crawler with a camera was inserted in the riser at berth number 6. I saw that it was then pulled back out. I called Mr. Jason Beckles and asked him why it was pulled back out. He informed me that the tether was tangled up and that the crawler would be reinserted. I continued to communicate with Mr. Beckles, who informed me that the crawler could not move past a scuba tank that blocked the pipe. In parallel, at circa 3:35 a.m., I called Mr. Yearwood to inquire about sourcing additional oxygen tanks, and Mr. Andrew Farah indicated that while there was a decompression chamber available for Mr. Boodram on the vessel Gulfstream Eagle, 3 additional tanks of oxygen were needed. Mr. Farah subsequently reported that these oxygen tanks were no longer required, as Mr. Boodram was to be taken at 7:30 a.m. to Labray Industrial Development Company, Labidco, for decompression treatment. At circa 4:30 a.m., IMT instructed me to proceed with the removal of the flange at number 5 and have the crawler inserted from berth number 5. At circa 5 a.m., I started to make my way to berth number 5 with HHSL Safety Systems Limited and their crawler. Upon arrival at berth 5, the flange was already removed, and the crawler was inserted into the riser around 6 a.m. The crawler went in vertically, but then the camera went black due to the presence of oil at the bottom of the riser. HHSL attempted to clean the camera lens, but were unable to do so as the oil was very thick. I then proceeded to return to shore with HHSL, where they debriefed with the IMT. At circa 9:45 a.m., I attended a meeting with Mr. Kazim Ali Sr., Mr. Way, and Mr. Colin Piper in the conference upstairs in the shipping building. Mr. Ali indicated that in discussions with Mr. Boodram, the migration barrier was removed and dropped into the sea, and they were in the process of taking out the inflatable plug when the incident occurred. Mr. Ali informed us that the plug was still intact and that a horizontal bar existed in the riser that needed to be removed to gain access through the top side riser. At around lunchtime, I went to the onshore control room and requested an operator, Mr. Narayan, to perform a water and oil dip at berth number 5 in order to determine if the inflatable plug was really intact or acting as a seal within the pipeline. He reported that 1 foot of oily emulsion was detected. This meant that there was some water in the oil that Mr. Narayan detected in the line. I relayed this information to the IMT. At around 5:45 p.m., I was in a meeting. A meeting was held with IMT to outline a plan for the night shift that included removal of the hyperbaric chamber, installation of booms at berth number 6, removal of oil on top of the riser, and pumping out of water from berth 6. This plan was intended to determine whether a rescue dive into the pipeline from berth 6 could be accomplished after removal of the chamber and any oil and any obstructions in the line. Sunday, 27 February 2022. On Sunday, 27 February, I received a call from Mr. Kazim Ali Sr., LMCS, at circa 8 a.m., indicating that he will be on site later with his divers to discuss a dive option with the IMT. I arrived at the shipping building circa 9 a.m., where I met Mr. Ali and escorted him and his team to the conference room downstairs shipping building. I then informed Mr. Piper and Mr. Way of Mr. Ali's arrival and presence in the conference room. At around 10:30 a.m., I conducted a briefing session to follow up on the plan from Saturday to clear the line. The plan was to fill the riser at berth number 5 with water using the Liang pump to move the oil from the horizontal part of 36C line so the oil could be pumped out of the line and into Lorena B vessel, which was at berth 6. During the course of the morning, I was informed either by the incident command or by Mr. Way that the operation by Paria had changed to focus on recovery of the divers. At around 12:40 p.m., I called HHSL to request the video footage obtained thus far, since the IMT had requested same so that it could be used in a risk assessment for dive operation proposed by LMCS. I then requested HHSL work with our information technology coordinator. I made a similar call to and arrangement with Atlantic LNG for the borescope camera footage which had been obtained by them by that time. At 2 p.m., I requested an operator, Mr. Narayan, to perform a water and oil dip at berths number 5 and 6. I asked him to do so in order to check whether the water level changed at berth 5 and to check the level at berth 8. That would in turn assist in determining how the plug was functioning in the line and whether it could be relied on in pumping operations to prevent any excess oil to be pumped out at berth 6. If the plug was intact, then there would not be any significant amount of oil going past it. Mr. Narayan reported 1 foot of oily emulsion at berth 5 and 3.5 foot of water from water finding paste dip with 1 inch of sediment from oil mark on gouging bob at berth number 6. I relayed this information to the IMT. The water level was therefore higher at one end of the pipeline than the other. The significance of this disparity in the water level between berths 5 and 6 was that it meant that something was preventing movement of liquid from one end to the other. It was therefore likely that the inflatable plug was acting as a seal in the line, causing one end of the pipeline, berth 6, to have more liquid than the berth 5. The liquid would have exerted some pressure on the horizontal part of the line and meant that the horizontal was likely filled with fluid. This would in turn eliminate any air pockets. Additionally, because the inflatable plug acted as a seal, it could be used as a water displacement device to assist in recovery. Around the same time, I attended a meeting with Mr. Way to start fabrication of discharge and bypass valve manifold to conduct a water displacement exercise from berth number 5 to berth number 6, using salt water and the Lang pump on the Tug Carib Valley. The water displacement exercise involved the use of 2 diesel-driven pumps, 1 main and spare, on the board of the Carib Valley tug located at berth number 5 to pump salt water at a controlled rate into 36 sea line riser through a fabricated spool equipped with a bypass valve and discharge valve to carefully control the water being displaced. This was to recover the bodies of the divers. At 3 p.m., the Paria and Heritage engineers and I commenced technical evaluation, preparation of risk assessment, and operation procedure documents associated with the water displacement exercise using the inflatable plug that was already in the line. Circa 5:30 to 6:30 p.m., I was informed that no oil was observed floating on top at berth 5. I indicated to the team on berth number 5 that the pump out from berth number 5 would not be productive as no oil could be transferred to runner B. Circa 7:15, during an IMT meeting, I was informed of the requirement to commence on-site activities to recover the bodies of the 4 divers at 4:30 a.m. on Monday, 28th February morning. At circa 9 p.m., I participated in a team exercise involving Paria operations personnel and Paria and Heritage Petroleum Company Limited Heritage engineers for risk assessment and operations procedure finalization for the water displacement described above. Further, discussions were held with the IMT to finalize preparation for the operation on the following day. Instructions were given to the offshore team to fill the riser at berth number 5 with water as much as possible while leaving room for the water displacement device. Monday, 28th February 2022. I left the shipping building at circa 1 a.m. on Monday, 28th February. Upon my return to the shipping building at 4:30 a.m. on the said day, I met with Mr. Piper, Mr. Way, and the operations team. I indicated to the operations team that the operational manpower arrangements for the water displacement exercise would be Mr. Niblet and myself on berth number 6 to monitor the effluent from the riser and to advise those at berth number 5 to vary the pressure rate. Mr. Kabe, Mr. Galloway, and Mr. Chattogoon would be stationed at berth number 5 to conduct the pumping operations by controlling the flow rate into the riser. I also went through the planned operations with the team and highlighted the need to recover the bodies of the divers with respect and dignity. Following the briefing, a walk down was conducted to ensure that all site preparations were made at the riser on berth number 5 and berth number 6. It was reported that the valve manifold and the scaffolding to access the riser at berth number 5, as well as the scaffolding at berth number 6, required adjustments. Additionally, it was reported that the liquid level on berth number 5 was lower than that which it was previously filled to, and that the level on berth number 6 had risen. At circa 7:30 a.m., I called together the team to re-evaluate the risk assessments given the changed conditions of the 36 sea line riser liquid levels overnight. At circa 9:30 a.m., I proceeded to berth number 5 to inspect the final configuration. Certain adjustments were made to the configuration there. Mr. Niblett, Mr. Way, and myself then proceeded to berth number 6, where I made certain observations and caused LMCS tug Sunnyday with LMCS's agreement to be moved a safe distance from the berth. At circa 10:15 a.m., I provided my phone to Mr. Hassan Mohammed for him to record the events when the pumping operation started at 10:30 a.m. A safety toolbox talk was held with all participants where Mr. Way and I reiterated the need to keep the area clear except for the water displacement essential personnel and the need for the utmost discretion and preservation of the diver's dignity. We indicated that the only phone allowed camera footage was that being used by Mr. Mohammed. We requested from security that they remained vigilant to enforce this. At berth number 5, over the radio, we were informed by Mr. Chattogoon that they were completing their safety toolbox talk and the pump will then be started on idle, with the bypass fully open and the discharge to berth 6 fully closed. At 10:40 a.m., I asked the offshore 1 radio channel to be kept dedicated for direct communication between berths only. At circa 10:45 a.m. to 11 a.m., the pump at berth number 5 was started. At circa 11:25 a.m., I saw water emanating from berth 6 riser. After some disruptions of the exercise, they were stood down. During the period that the operations were stood down, HHSL deployed their crawler at berth number 6 to check for movement of the objects within the pipe. A rope and scuba tank were observed along the horizontal section of 36 sea line. The pumping operations resumed at 2:40 p.m. However, they were stood down again due to certain issues. The opportunity was taken to redeploy the crawler, and it was observed that the scuba tank was circa 25 feet closer to berth number 6. At 5:45 p.m., the water displacement operations were resumed. At 5:50 p.m., I observed oily water, diving gloves, and a scuba tank, followed by the bodies of 3 divers in sequence, and then the other diving equipment. The faces of the bodies were unrecognizable. I quickly reminded Mr. Niblett to radio berth number 5 to close the discharge valve first, then shut down the pump. I received a call from Mr. Piper and informed him of the recovery of 3 bodies. I then handed my phone to Mr. Niblett while I went to LMCS's Sunny Day vessel to inform them of the recovery of 3 bodies. I then needed some time to compose myself and my emotions. Mr. Way went to the LMCS personnel and also informed them of the progress made on the recovery. I spoke with offshore operations on the oil that emitted from the riser. Even though it was mostly contained within the booms, there was a slight sheen between the inner and outer booms. I observed Mr. Niblett and Mr. Kurt Dyer assist with the transfer of the bodies. and recovered items from the wooden platforms to launch Wahoo. At circa 6:50 p.m., the water displacement operation was restarted. I saw oil emitting from the riser. Pumping operations were then aborted as no more movement was possible, since it appeared that the inflatable plug was either deflated or that too much clearance existed between the pipe walls and the inflatable plug. I then observed at circa 8 p.m. the plan discussed earlier to use instrument tubing to make a tool to feel the inside of the pipe was being implemented. Circa 100 feet of tubing was used, but no items were discovered. At circa 9:25 p.m., upon the on-site team's arrival back into the shipping building, the general manager, Mustaq Mohammed, reiterated the need to continue the recovery effort. I explained the options available for the recovery of the last body, and after a lengthy discussion, the team decided to pump from berth number 5 to the Lorena B. I left the terminal at circa midnight. Tuesday, 1st March 2022. I arrived at shipping building at circa 8:15 a.m. on Tuesday, 1st March. I met with the IMT team to discuss the options for the retrieval of the last body. In this regard, I had discussions with representatives from the National Gas Company and Mr. Shamil Ali from Heritage at circa 9:30 a.m. At circa midday, I requested an operator to perform a water and oil dip at berth number 5 and number 6. The operators reported approximately 50 feet of water at berth number 5 riser. Riser was full, with 1 inch of sediment from oil mark and gouging bob. At berth number 6, the operators reported an airspace of 6 feet, then 5.5 feet of oil, followed by 51 feet of water, and then 1 inch of sediment from oil mark and gouging bob, adding up to 62.5 feet from elbow to top of riser. I relayed this information to the IMT. At circa 1:50 p.m., I began preparation of risk assessment and operations procedure to install and use a water displacement device to recover the 4th diver. Between 3:30 and 4 p.m., the crawler was deployed, and I saw various objects and oil in the pipeline. At around 5 p.m., at 700 feet tether length, diving equipment was observed entangled. Mr. Way, Mr. Niblett, and I headed out to berth number 6 to view same and to provide further on-site support. After assessing berth number 6, the on-site team and the crawler then proceeded to berth number 5, where the crawler was again deployed at circa 7 p.m. The crawler went into approximately 120 feet before too much oil was seen on the bottom of the crawler tracks. At that point, 12 to 14 inches of oil on the vertical section was also present. Based on this information, I estimated circa 180 to 250 bbls of oil remaining in the pipe. The team returned to the shipping building and joined an IMT meeting where Mr. Piper indicated, among other things, that based on the estimated remaining oil in the pipe, if it were to be discharged into the sea, there could be far-reaching implications. This meeting concluded at circa 10:15 p.m. Between 10:30 p.m. and 1:30 a.m., discussions were held by the IMT and arrangements were put in place for the fabrication and sourcing of material to occur during that night. I left the terminal at circa 1:30 a.m. Wednesday, 2nd March 2022. I arrived at shipping building at circa 7:15 a.m. on Wednesday, March 2nd. I held discussions with the IMT, conducted risk assessments, and made certain requests on logistical and technical arrangements. I arrived at booth number 6 at circa 8 p.m. and Mr. Way and I conducted a safety toolbox talk with Leng, NGC personnel, HSC personnel, security and operations personnel. At circa 11 p.m. the pump at booth number 5 was started. I gave my phone to Hassan Mohammed to record the operations. At circa 11:20 p.m. water was seen emanating from booth number 6, riser. Thursday, 3rd March 2022. At circa 12:30 a.m. on Thursday, March 3rd, oil started to be emitted from booth number 6. The booth number 6 pump was quickly started. I gave my phone to Hassan Mohammed to record the operations. The suction hose for the pump at booth number 6 started to rise up out of the riser, and at 12:39 a.m. the discharge valve at booth number 5 was closed and both pumps shut down as the 4th diver's body was seen. I observed that Mr. Niblet, Mr. Kurt Dyer and Mr. Ademola Sue assisted with the transfer of the body from the wooden platform to the launch. Woohoo. At circa 1:45 a.m. pumping at booth 5 was restarted in order to retrieve the water displacement device. Same was retrieved at 2 a.m. and the pump was shut down. I returned on shore at 3 a.m. I left shipping building at 4:30 a.m. after waiting on the rest of the operations team, including the NGC personnel, to arrive from offshore at booth number 5. Dated this 16th day of August 2022, Catherine Balkissoon, Acting Technical Lead, Paria. And this was submitted to the Secretary to the Commission, which was also witnessed by the instructing attorney at law for the Paria Fuel Trading Company, Gretel Baird. So folks, from Mrs. Balkissoon's statement, there has been quite a lot of inconsistencies that, again, I have noted, and I'm wondering if you guys have noticed that, and I'm looking forward to your comments about this as well. Because on the one hand, we have the Coast Guard officer in the statement that I would have read yesterday said that he got specific instructions from Ms. Balkissoon to prevent people from diving and also to leave. But according to Ms. Balkissoon, she said that she got instructions from Mr. Piper, who she put him on speakerphone, but nobody, enforced this rule. She didn't witness anybody enforcing this rule. Neither she, Mr. Piper, or anyone enforced this rule, but the Coast Guard says otherwise. And the Coast Guard said that actually she asked them to leave since they weren't required, but in her statement she says that the Coast Guard asked if they can leave because they're not doing anything, and of course, if she wants them, they could call them back. So again, such small things that are inconsistent in these statements, that it leaves much to be desired. The statement that just follows this one, I'm gonna start reading your comments in a second. The statement that just follows this one is Mr. Colin Piper, right? That's literally on the next page, Mr. Colin Piper's statement. So it would be interesting to hear his perspective. But let me read through some of the comments here. Right. Daniel says, if the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard didn't have the training and equipment for commercial diving, didn't LMCS have the divers and equipment? Why were they prevented? Well, we heard from, Christopher Buram and others that they were prevented. We even saw on the day there was big confusion because, people were saying that, the Coast Guard pointed guns at them and prevented them. And even the Coast Guard officer whose statement I read yesterday confirmed that this happened. And they were following instructions that they received from Catherine Balkissoon. Catherine, in her statement, said that nobody enforced this rule, but that it was instructions received from Mr. Piper. But Mr. Piper himself didn't force the Coast Guard or instruct anyone or even their security to carry out this instruction. This is what Catherine says in her sworn testimony. This is conflicted very directly and succinctly by the Coast Guard, who specifically names Catherine Balkissoon as the person who told them to carry out this instruction. So, you know, that there's a major inconsistency there, and I look forward to Catherine being cross-examined so we can get to the bottom of that. Okay, so let's hear what other people are saying. Are there any witness statements from Diver Cuban's son? He was present. Actually, yes, there is witness statements from Mr. Cuban's son, and we can definitely read that at some point. Let's see. Just reading through some of your comments here. Let's just stop this for a second. Okay, so Way lied when he said that he considered the men dead on Sunday afternoon, because it was way before that, according to the statement. Again, you raise a very good point, because so many of these statements between the different representatives of Paria are inconsistent with each other. And it really leads us to and of course, with Mrs. Balkissoon, she has dates and times specifically that she has put into her statement. It seems very, very organized, I would say, compared to a lot of the statements. A lot of people can't necessarily record the time, just give us something very general. But she was able to give us specifics and times and whom she spoke to, and what rooms she was involved in, and the persons that were witnesses in those rooms. So I thought that was very, very interesting, because now, based on the statement, we have to cross-examine some of these other people to kind of confirm exactly how come their statement differs, based on this sworn testimony from Mrs. Balkissoon. All right. Yes, Randy also asked a follow-up question about the fourth body being recovered. Yes, they only initially got 3 bodies, and then they were trying to get the fourth. I mean, they nearly even left the fourth body in there because of the risk of environmental degradation, because Mr. Piper was concerned, if they didn't do things securely, that it might cause a bigger problem. Tally says these Paria officials had enough time to plan their statements, but I hope they know to live in this world of taking life is a hell of a thing. Knowing you took a life from God, what will you tell God after you spend this holiday on earth? Catherine, Way, Piper, Muhammad, George, Rowley, Stewart, and the lawyer Peterson. I mean, I wouldn't include the lawyer in this, or even some of those people as well, because lawyers are paid to represent and defend their folks. And of course, this is still something that is under scrutiny, and we're still getting all the facts. Some of the facts are we still need to get those facts, right? But again, we can still personally, as members of the public, dig down deeper into what's taking place here. Keisha says a lot of inconsistencies with their stories. It seems she's putting the Coast Guard under the bus. Yes, you're absolutely right, because based on the statement we read, yesterday, it is very clear what the Coast Guard said, right? And now we are in a position now where we're sitting down and thinking, well, would there be a reason for Lieutenant Hargreaves to lie? And who should we believe? Should we believe Catherine Balkissoon, whose statement has several inconsistencies? Remember, she reports. So Michael Way, the mechanical maintenance manager for Paria, is actually a lot more senior than Catherine Balkissoon. She reports to him, right? She reports to him. So it's very interesting that she has a vastly different account of the state of play to Michael Way. Given that she reports to him, surely she will give him status reports and so on. So it was very, very interesting to see that her statement included lots of things that contradicted very clearly, especially also, when Mr. Way knew about, certain things and whatnot. So I found that to be very instructive. Okay, sorry, I'm just reading through lots of comments coming through. Marissa Ramnath Garbdas says, it's interesting how everyone's statement from Paria isn't adding up. Yes, it all seems rather mismatched. Beju says, Catherine is a scapegoat. That is his view. Chris says, how would a pump be attached when the pipe was isolated? You need to get a sense of what causes delta P. The difference of pressure can be realized by less water in berth 5 as opposed to berth 6. The removal of the plug allowed a suction due to the other riser drawing liquid to equalize. The suction will draw the water into the chamber and make it enter the top of the pipe as well as sweep the divers into the pipe. Now, this is something, if you recall, Kazim Ali Sr. mentioned in his statement. Exactly what you described. He described how the delta P functions and so on, due to the different pressure, in the different ends of the pipe between berth 5 and berth 6. And due to the differential pressure, it causes somewhat of a vacuum. And if there's sort of any interference, you get suckered into that. Him knowing that, being prepared for that, training for that, and so on, in his statement, he said that, he dealt with a lot worse conditions, but that actually they had all the relevant commercial equipment, and a plan which actually Catherine acknowledges in her statement, compared to Michael Way, who didn't acknowledge the fact that LMCS had a dive plan and a rescue plan. Catherine acknowledged that. So it's quite clear. Even Lieutenant Hargreaves acknowledged that LMCS had a rescue plan. Michael Way is the only person from Paria who said that LMCS didn't have a plan. It just so happened that the Lieutenant Hargreaves and so on, being PADI certified and so on, I think, of course, Paria gave a lot more credence to his risk assessments, but his risk assessments came from a place of the Coast Guard not being trained in commercial diving and not having the requisite equipment to carry out the rescue for those divers. So in his estimation, based on the Coast Guard's training and involvement and not having the requisite equipment, it was his advice in his statement that a commercial diver with the relevant equipment ought to have done the rescue. Of course, which LMCS, they are commercial divers. They also, worked with other people to get the requisite equipment, which they had actually brought down to the site, including, oxygen tanks on barges and vessels and lights and whatnot, and ropes and so on. And they you would have seen, if you heard and listened to the statement that we read the other day, that they were prepared with equipment, but they were prevented from doing so by the Coast Guard, who stopped them from taking that up. So, but thank you for sharing your view, Chris. Okay, so we're hearing that stated they didn't have. Right, yes, we saw that. Right, so very, very interesting comments, people. The diver's son said guns were pointed at him from going in. Yes, this is a point that was acknowledged by Lieutenant Hargreaves. He did confirm that that occurred, but it didn't directly happen from him, but he's aware that that occurred. So that is true. And in the beginning, I didn't know whether or not that is true, but, Munish says, in my mind, that's like having a heart condition and going to a doctor who is a GP and taking the GP's advice and not the heart specialist. That's a good point, right? But again, everybody wants to be PADI certified because that is like the industry standard. And of course, Lieutenant Hargreaves is PADI certified in a number of specialist areas, right? Not only that, he has extensive experience in all sorts of different types of rescue. And I think that is a reason why potentially Paria, at least in their case, may want to say that they gave a little bit more credence to his advice, even though they wouldn't necessarily say that in that way. But it then conflicts with Mr. Way's contribution when he says that, it was going to be, LMCS's responsibility to come up with a plan to bring the relevant equipment and to get the rescue done. As we saw from Ms. Balkissoon's statement, that is not exactly what took place, right? And Ms. Balkissoon was very careful to describe the events very, very, very carefully. And so we got to have a sort of a visual into what that toolbox talk and the IMT's meeting really consisted of. And then there is this mismatch between when we actually came and decided that those divers were dead based on, compared to what he said in his statement as well. Tally says, Paria stated that they had to know the condition of the line before anyone entering. The point is the property belongs to Paria. They don't expect BP to know the condition, right? It's Paria's property. They're supposed to know the condition of the line before work is being done. Just to add to that, Tally, during Kazim Ali Sr.'s statement, he would have said that, it was their expectation that the lines between berth 5 and 6 were to be leveled off, right? Because he would have sent communications and stuff about his concerns regarding works with respect to that. Now, Paria had a different contractor, according to Kazim Ali Sr., dealing with the equalizing of the pressuring and so on. Now, I'm not sure if that happened or not, but clearly, based on the differential pressure, it appears that, if the company that Paria had employed to equalize that pressure did or didn't do the work that was required. So in that context, it created a delta P situation. But aside from that, there's so many different factors that we have to consider as well. Jairam says, it's no if what, it's not if what, but Paria deliberately let those 4 guys suffocate and die, and all of them trying to lie and cover it up. Okay, different perspectives. Mr. Turk says, in this situation, if found guilty other than compassion, will anyone go to jail? So let's be very clear. A commission of inquiry is simply an inquiry to gather the facts. And then after, they get all the facts and they're able to establish, overall what has taken place, then a commission of inquiry can give recommendations. The chair of the commission of inquiry and its commissioners can actually recommend prosecution if they determine that the matters that they've investigated and deciphered rise to negligence of the highest degree. So indeed, they can recommend, but they're not a court in the sense that they can prosecute or make a judgment that any particular person is guilty as charged or not. But they certainly can recommend that persons be prosecuted for negligence, which has potentially led to the deaths of these divers. Yes. So that's, to bring further clarity to your question. They can recommend, but they can't convict or do anything like that, because they don't really have that authority. But yes, it just allows us to get all of the facts. So guys, this is a very, very fluid conversation and whatnot. And people are still commenting, not just negligence but criminal negligence, says Brian Wilson. But yes, it's very difficult to follow because comments are coming, and this thing is moving pretty fast. But I'm trying my best to highlight as many comments as possible. Someone said the maths is not matsing. Yes. All right, folks, I think we've naturally come to the end. Okay, there's another comment here. It says LMCS was supposed to make sure they had the proper workers with the proper certification. According to the OSHA report, only 2 men had commercial diving licenses. And I don't know if you heard Christopher Boudram. Also, this was sometimes reflected by Michael Way as well. There's LMCS has worked with Petrotrin in its previous incarnation, and now Paria for many years. In fact, getting, I think, nearly 90% of most of the sea works with them. And so they have a certain level of experience around that, and some of the certifications that people are expected to have, people have it more commercially in Trinidad, but like the IMCA and PADI, some of these things cost in excess of certain amounts of money that it's just not really accessible for people to have because they're so expensive, right? But it hasn't stopped Christopher Buram and Kazamalu Senior. They've done these things before with Paria, right? With all the relevant things and whatnot. So Paria has been using LMCS to conduct these similar things, update plugs and all this type of stuff and do whatnot. That has been done. Okay. So someone says, we need to take into consideration that these people are giving evidence under oath. That is correct. They've given sworn testimony, which they are saying that is true and correct to the best of their knowledge and belief. And so they are actually giving statements under oath, right? Good night, people who are tuning in. Paria was supposed to have full qualifications of employees, of contractors, and pre-tendering qualifications. Now, here's something I would say to that, right? Paria dropped the ball, right? Because they didn't have proper assessments of the, pre-work requirements. They didn't do a proper risk assessment, and they didn't have, according to Michael Way, having listened to him sitting down in the Commission of Inquiry, didn't really have the competent authorities to, decipher what was required and what type of work and to oversee. And if, be that as it may, Paria ought to have gotten relevant consultants, which many oil and energy companies do, to lead the process. And they failed to do that. And so they must take responsibility as well for their failing to do their due diligence that they ought to have been expected to do, right? This isn't a one-way street. Of course, the facility is run by Paria, and they had certain obligations, even by the contract that we would have seen very early on, especially going through the statement and so on of Kazim Ali Sr., where it was very clear that even within the contract, it spoke about Paria's responsibility to ensure the safety of the site and whatnot, right? And so there was a particular expectation that they, got their house in order. Okay, so I think naturally this live has come to an end. Yes, to safety and whatnot. Oh, I'm seeing a comment from folks on YouTube. They're saying people are being. I'll just highlight it. This is a comment from folks tuning in on YouTube. They say people are being paid for high level job, and with that, people should be held responsible. Okay, yep, absolutely. People should be held responsible. At the end of the day, this is a state-run company, and we have a vested interest in ensuring that the people who are at the top of these jobs are doing their jobs, and in the absence of doing their jobs appropriately and correctly, if indeed they're found to be doing their jobs negligently, then not only should they be removed, but action should be taken for their failings if it is proven that they failed to such an extent that it contributed to the deaths of 4 divers, right? And so, folks, we've naturally really come to the end. I know that you're continuing to send your comments and whatnot, but I think we had a pretty interesting conversation. Do keep the conversations going, right? Because, I will continue to monitor and chat and whatnot. And maybe tomorrow we can go through the Mr. Kilburn's son and also Colin Piper, and see their perspectives. All right. Well, thank you for tuning in tonight, being part of the conversation as usual. And I really enjoy the conversations that we have. So I implore that you continue to stay vested in seeing what has taken place, to understanding what the people are saying at the level of the witness testimonies that they've sworn to. Of course, so far we've seen so many contradictions, even more contradictions now, having listened to Catherine Balkissoon. So, in some ways, I really can't wait for the Commission of Inquiry to return so that we can dig deeper. These lawyers can dig deeper. Of course, you must remember that lawyers all have their agendas for their clients, right? So there's always an angle. And that's why it's important for us to read this material ourselves, because we often don't get the full story because lawyers are hitting things from different angles and not giving us the full context. And so looking at things ourselves prior to the Commission of Inquiry coming back on, having heard it before, we can then remember, oh yes, but Catherine said this, and Michael Way said that, and Kazim Ali Sr. said this, and Lieutenant said that. We will remember these things, and so we'll be able to better understand what is taking place at the Commission of Inquiry, and actually which angle the different lawyers representing the different parties are coming from. All right? Well, good night, everyone. Thank you for following. And let's keep this conversation alive, because these divers deserve justice.